Our second lesson for today comes from the book of Exodus, chapter 3, verses 1 through 14. It goes like this. Now Moses was tending the flock of Jethro, his father-in-law, the priest of Midian. And he led the flock to the far side of the wilderness and came to Horeb, the mountain of God. There the angel of the Lord appeared to him in flames of fire from within a bush. Moses saw that though the bush was on fire, it did not burn up. So Moses thought, I will go over and see this strange sight. Why, the bush does not burn up. When the Lord saw that he had gone over to look, God called to him from within the bush, Moses! Moses! And Moses said, Here I am. Do not come any closer, God said. Take off your sandals, for the place where you are standing is holy ground. Then he said, I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob. At this, Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look at God. The Lord said, I have indeed seen the misery of my people in Egypt. I have heard them crying out because of their slave drivers. I am concerned about their suffering. So I have come down to rescue them from the hand of the Egyptians, and to bring them up out of that land and into a good and spacious land, a land flowing with milk and honey, the home of the Canaanites, Hittites, Amorites, Perizzites, Hivites, and Jebusites. And now the cry of the Israelites has reached me, and I have seen the way the Egyptians are oppressing them. So now, go. I am sending you to Pharaoh to bring my people, the Israelites, out of Egypt. But Moses said to God, Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh and bring the Israelites out of Egypt? And God said, I will be with you, and this will be the sign to you that it is I who have sent you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship God on this mountain. Moses said to God, Suppose I go to the Israelites and say to them, The God of your fathers has sent me to you. And they ask me, What is his name? Then what shall I tell them? God said to Moses, I am who I am. This is what you are to say to the Israelites. I am has sent me to you. Well, Moses is for sure one of the characters in the Bible that we can really relate to. His humanity reminds us of ourselves. In our passage today, God calls Moses to a major task to free the entire oppressed Hebrew people. Just think about that request for a second. This was a terrifyingly huge request. This would be like God saying today, Hey, I see that the people of Russia are being oppressed by their dictator Putin. I want you to go up against all of the Russian government, to go against all the Russian armies and set them free. Our own reaction of disbelief and dismay would probably be exactly like that of Moses. What? Who am I that I'm going to go to Russia and free the people from Putin? It would be ridiculous. You see, at the time, the Egyptians were a world power. They had thousands of soldiers, chariots, and horses. One lone guy, who just so happened to be raised as part of the princess's household, was just not going to be a big of a challenge to the Egyptian regime at all. Moses wasn't even an actual biological son of the princess. He was an adopted son, maybe even somewhat of a pet compared to the rest of the Egyptian royal kids. With all of this baggage, it is not surprising that Moses does not identify himself as the kind of person with the credentials to be able to accomplish such a great and amazing task. He was afraid to think of himself as a grandson of the Pharaoh, a person who actually had the skills and the ability to lead people. Marianne Williamson, in her book, A Return to Love, calls such thoughts our deepest fear. She writes, "Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world. There's nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We are all meant to shine, as children do. We were born to make manifest the glory of God that is within us. It's not just in some of us, it's in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we're liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. Now, I think this is what was going on with Moses. He was afraid to tap into his training and his connections in the royal Egyptian household. We need to remember also that Moses was still wanted for murder. As a young man, when he witnessed an Egyptian beating up a Hebrew man, Moses had jumped right into the fight against oppression and injustice. And he had rescued that Hebrew man by beating the Egyptian to death. Then he tried to cover the whole thing up by burying the Egyptian's body in the sand. But when Pharaoh found out what Moses had done, Pharaoh had tried to have Moses killed, and so Moses had to skip the country. He ran off to live in Midian, where he had gotten married and created a new life for himself. Now, this was a very different life than living in the Pharaoh's household. It was a simple life as a shepherd, small and quiet. But God knew that being a shepherd was not the life that Moses was supposed to lead. It wasn't where his heart for justice longed to be. Of course, Moses wanted to free his people, but he had settled because it seemed too impossible, something too big, too far away. But despite his doubts, here we have God calling Moses to do this great, big, huge, impossible task anyway. Perhaps remembering what it felt like when he was a young man, when he was not afraid to stand up against oppression and injustice, I can imagine Moses was struggling. And at the meeting of the burning bush, Moses was afraid to let go and let God. Now, one of the most successful Disney songs in recent years is the song Let It Go from the animated movie Frozen. During the song, Elsa decides to stop hiding the innate magical powers that she has and instead to embrace them. Instead of limiting herself to being the good girl and fitting into acceptable societal norms, Elsa literally throws away her crown, lets down her hair, and starts to create. The results are stunning. She doesn't stop by creating a simple snowman. She builds massive ice bridges out of thin air, and then she creates an ice castle, her very own place in the world. Many people have reported that they were inspired by the song Let It Go to finally become themselves. LGBTQ folks came out of the closet. Bipolar and autistic people accepted themselves with their unique life perspectives. And many an artist got out of their own way to allow their own creativity to flow more freely through their poetry, their art, and their music. Parker Palmer, in his widely acclaimed book, Let Your Life Speak, begins with a quote that has stopped many people in their mental tracks. He begins by simply asking this question: is the life you are living your life? Is the life you are living your life? This is a question about whether the life you are living right now is actually the life that your inner self actually wants to live out in you. Parker Palmer goes on to teach about how many people live divided lives, doing what society says they ought to do with their life, rather than what their heart has been calling them to do. He goes on to teach that at a certain juncture that some people must choose between allowing their selfhood to die or to actually live in a way that claims their identity and their integrity. Parker advocates for an undivided life, where the life you are living on the outside reflects the truth that you know on the inside. He writes, "The punishment imposed on us for claiming our true self can never be worse than the punishment we impose on ourselves by failing to make that claim." So, my friends, what does all of this mean for those of us hearing it today? First, I hope that each of you are inspired and encouraged to be honest with yourself on who God is calling you to be. What sort of wonderful and amazing gifts have you been given that you have been afraid to live into, afraid to unleash on the world? What sort of greatness lies within you that is just waiting for your permission to give it so that it can blossom? Secondly, we need to know that we are not alone. God is with us on this amazing adventure that is our lives. We can try to run to the farthest corners of the earth. We can try to deaden ourselves with drink or drugs. We can destroy our lives and the lives of others. We can even cross the universe in a spaceship or fall into a black hole of time. But because we are in this universe, we are by definition in relationship with God. Even when we pretend God doesn't exist, our God is loving and patient and waits for us to come to our senses. For some people, that takes hitting bottom. For others, even that isn't enough, and they must cross through death before the truth becomes clear to them. But we need to remember the promise that at the end, every knee will bow, every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord. Finally, the final thing to remember from our passages today is that our God has a special heart for victims of injustice and the oppressed. We see hurting people around us every single day, and so often we turn the other way. There are so many who are struggling to get food. There are those who cannot find housing. There are people who are bullied for who and what they are. There is discrimination, unfairness, systems of inequality where voices cry out for justice and they get drowned out by those who have power and wealth. And when we look at all of this happening around us, do we just shrug our shoulders and say, who am I? I can't make a difference. We tend to walk away, but our God calls us back. Back to the work before us, reminding us that God is with us, and by working through the gifts that we have all been given, real change in this world is possible. My friends, our God is doing a new thing, creating a new heaven and a new earth in this time and place. If we are faithful, if we allow God to use our time, our talents, and our treasure, the universe itself will become more like the kingdom that God designed it to be. I want to be part of that. Don't you? Let's do it. So be it. Amen.